So Bivol versus Beterbiev is finally taking place on October 12th, and people are finding it impossible to pick a winner. Both fighters are in the top 10 pound for pound, and it's very rare for two elite fighters at this level to fight each other. So I'm going to explain my reasons for picking Artur Beterbiev to beat Dmitry Bivol. Starting with Dmitry Bivol, he won his first ever world title in 2017 by knocking out Trent Broadhurst in round 1. He would then defend that title 7 more times against names like Sullivan Barrera, Jean Pascal, Joe Smith Jr., before taking the biggest fight of his career against Canelo Alvarez. This was most people's first exposure to Dmitry Bivol, and despite being a big underdog against Canelo, Bivol would soundly outbox Canelo across the 12-round distance, making a massive statement against someone who's considered by many to be pound for pound number 1 at the time, coming off a massive tear at 168 pounds. This would then make Bivol a huge name in boxing, and his most recent fight was against Malik Zenad, who he fought in June of this year, which also happened to be his first stoppage win in about 6 years. And as of right now, he is the favourite against Beterbiev. What makes Dmitry Bivol so good is the defence. As you can see from the clips on screen, landing clean on Dmitry Bivol is an almost impossible task. From his jab, his parries, his footwork, his combinations, his speed, his accuracy, his guard, his conditioning, Bivol is almost a perfect fighter, and it would take something special to beat him. Turning to his opponent, Artur Beterbiev. Beterbiev would win his first world title the same year as Dmitry Bivol in 2017 against Enrico Colin. He would defend that title 2 more times before trying to unify against Alexander Gvozdyk, who was a pound-for-pound level fighter at the time. This was a massive step up for Beterbiev, and Gvozdyk would give him a real tough fight for the first half. Gvozdyk being someone who in his prime I think could give a really good fight to Dmitry Bivol, especially considering that even in his old age, Gvozdyk gave a really tough fight to David Benavidez, which made it even more impressive for Beterbiev to stop him after finding his timing and eventually breaking Gvozdyk down. This would then put the division on notice because now they had a champion who was unified and also had a 100% knockout ratio. Beterbiev would then unify the titles once again, 3 years later against Joe Smith Jr. While Joe Smith Jr. isn't as impressive of a name as Alexander Gvozdyk, what made it impressive was the ease of which Beterbiev dispatched of him in 2 rounds. Because while Joe Smith Jr. wasn't elite, he's always been someone who's been known to give a tough fight to anyone that he's in the ring with. With Beterbiev showing that he's more than just a brawler, showing great defensive ability and fighting off the back foot. He'd then travel to the UK to knock out Anthony Yarde, and then back to Canada to knock out Callum Smith, being his most recent fight in January of this year, which now brings us to the present day, where after years of negotiation and speculation, the two would finally fight each other for undisputed. If you compare the numbers, they're actually in quite similar positions in their careers, with Beterbiev being 20-0, Bivol being 23-0, both making their debut a year apart, both winning their first world titles in the same year. Bivol having more title defences, but Beterbiev having more titles won, unifying with 3 as opposed to Bivol's 1. The best win between them being Alexander Gvozdyk in my opinion, who being a natural light heavyweight is a better win than Canelo. Before I get into the actual prediction, I'm going to clarify that I don't really consider the age or the injuries as a real factor for Beterbiev. Even though they could be a potential factor, there's no way of knowing how much it's actually going to affect the fight itself. And if we just assume that Beterbiev is going to show up in the same form that he did against Callum Smith, we'll have the most realistic expectation for the fight. My first point being that Bivol is too comfortable fighting at his own pace. I've chosen the Lyndon Arthur fight for these clips because it's probably the worst offender in terms of Bivol being on cruise control. Arthur being ridiculously negative the entire fight, meaning that Bivol was more than happy to stay in second gear for almost the entire distance. We see the same thing in pretty much all of Bivol's fights because he is at least 1 or 2 levels above his opponents, which means he doesn't really have to throw much or even try. The most similar opponents Bivol's fought to Beterbiev would have to be Jean Pascal and Joe Smith Jr. While not being terrible fighters, they're also very one-dimensional, especially when compared to Beterbiev, who comparatively is very sophisticated when it comes to his forward pressure, the way he cuts off the ring, his crushing presence while he's in the ring, and his combinations against the ropes. Because Beterbiev seems to specialise in keeping someone in one place, which is on display in almost all of his fights, especially against people who naturally box off the back foot, like Dmitry Bivol. While Bivol might not actually be getting hit clean in these clips from the Canelo fight, what you might notice is that Bivol is almost always on full retreat mode when Canelo starts loading up. What Bivol's doing is very good, very impressive. He's tucking up well, he's defending almost everything, and he's moving out of the way appropriately. He's also never actually thrown back or planted his feet. And obviously since Canelo is not a light heavyweight, he's not going to be as effective as Beterbiev is when it comes to pressuring people against the ropes. Not only because of the power difference, but also simply because Beterbiev is better at it than Canelo is. It's because of this that I actually believe that Beterbiev by decision is the most likely outcome of the fight. The betting sites seem to have this idea that Beterbiev, if he doesn't get the knockout, is going to lose the fight by being outpointed, but it's also possible to outpoint someone by just working more. Because if Bivol's back is to the ropes almost the entire fight, Beterbiev will win those rounds by just throwing more and being the aggressor. But I do believe that Bivol's defence is good enough to the point where he can just shell up against the ropes and just avoid damage for as long as he can for the entire 12 rounds. Because if you notice, Bivol doesn't really have an inside game whatsoever. When he's up close, he shells up and waits to move out, instead of throwing back, because I don't think he'd risk facing the power of Beterbiev up close by throwing back. So in conclusion, I believe Artur Beterbiev will become undisputed by winning a decision in a slightly boring fight. Goodbye.